Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading.
Now today we're going to be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 20th of October 2018. Now the news that would be covered today is given on the screen and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And now with this, let us start with the first article. Now we've taken this article from page 7. Now what this article talks about is that a new experimental skin gel is being formed so as to protect farmers in India from the harmful effects of pesticides. Now the first thing that you need to know is which pesticide is this gel being formed for. Now organophosphate based pesticides are commonly used in India. However, the use of the organophosphate based pesticides by farmers in India is toxic to the nervous system, apart from being toxic also to the heart, wherein the absorption of these pesticides causes cognitive dysfunction, neurological disorders, paralysis, and even death to the person it has affected. Now, the second aspect that you need to understand on how does this gel protect farmers from the harmful effects of organophosphate based pesticides. Now, this gel inhibits the organophosphate based pesticides from getting absorbed into the body. And the third and the final aspect that you need to understand is why is it in a gel form? Now the reason it is in a gel form is because the organophosphate based pesticides is absorbed by the body through its skin, wherein only 10 to 15% absorption of this pesticide is through the nasal route, meaning through the mouth or the nose. Now the active ingredient of this gel is a substance called chitosan. Now chitosan is a substance that is found in the hard outer shells of crabs and shrimps. Now the main aspect that you need to understand as to why it is in a gel form is that this gel does not act as a physical barrier. But what the gel does is that it chemically deactivates the pesticide. Now let's say a farmer has put this gel on the skin of his hand. Then this gel does not stop the pesticides from entering into the body. But what happens is that there is a particular chemical called ester which is present in the organophosphate based pesticides. And it is this chemical which is present in the pesticides which enters into the body and causes neurological or heart disorders. And what this gel does is that it chemically reacts with this chemical ester, and with the chemical reaction of this gel with ester, it forms a particular form of acid which is not harmful to the humans. And it is through this chemical process that this gel deactivates the pesticide. Now you have to understand that this gel is still in experimental use and has still to be rolled out for human use. However, hopefully you've understood the basic aspects of this gel, wherein this experimental gel intends to protect Indian farmers from the harmful effect of the organophosphate based pesticides which are commonly used in India. Wherein this organophosphate based pesticides, especially a particular chemical called ester which is present in this pesticide, when absorbed through the human skin, is toxic to the nervous system and the heart, wherein it leads to cognitive dysfunction, neurological disorders, paralysis, and even death. Now, the reason it is in a gel format because organophosphate based pesticides, in particular ester, is mainly absorbed by the skin, wherein only 10 to 15% absorption is through the nasal route. Wherein you need to understand that this gel does not act as a physical barrier but chemically deactivates the pesticide. Wherein, let's say, if this gel is applied on the skin of the hand, it ensures when this chemical ester reaches this gel, both the gel and ester chemically react, forming an acid, and this acid is not harmful to the human. And it is through this process that the gel chemically deactivates the organophosphate based pesticide. Now let us understand as to where this news would be placed in your UPSC syllabus. Now with regards to your prelims examination, it would be placed in the section General Science. While with regards to your mains examination, it would be placed in GS paper 3 within the section Technology. And within the subsection Science and Technology, development and their applications and effects in everyday life. And apart from this, in the subsection Awareness in the field of biotechnology. Now question for practice is consider the following statements, and the answer to this question would be given in the end section of this video. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we've taken the lead editorial from the editorial page on page 8. Now this article has been written in the context of the recent murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Now Jamal Khashoggi was a citizen of Saudi Arabia, but he was living in the country of Turkey. And as a journalist, he had been critical of the Saudi Arabian monarchy, who run the government of Saudi Arabia. And it has been alleged that it was the monarchy or the government of Saudi Arabia that had assassinated the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. However, the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi is currently not required to be understood from a UPSC perspective, since it is a bilateral issue between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and this issue currently does not have any direct impact on India. However, from this article, what we need to understand is a particular view of the author with regards to the statement that the pen is mightier than the sword. Now, according to the author, authoritarian regimes such as the monarchy of Saudi Arabia do not fear open and violent acts of defiance. And the reason the author thinks that authoritarian regimes do not fear open and violent acts of defiance, and it is because it allows the authoritarian regime to first identify the opponents of the regime, and secondly, it allows the authoritarian regime to oppose this act of defiance by using violent methods by showing it as a protection of its national security. However, according to the author, authoritarian regimes do fear the written word. And according to the author, it has been showcased in the recent murder of Jamal Khashoggi that authoritarian regimes do fear the written word. So now hopefully you've understood the first aspect from this article, that the pen is mightier than the sword, wherein according to the author, authoritarian regimes do not fear open and violent acts of defiance. Wherein according to the author, open and violent acts of defiance actually help the authoritarian regime in identifying its opponent. And apart from this, it also helps the authoritarian regime to oppose these acts of defiance through the use of violent methods, wherein they reason the use of violent methods against its opponent as protection of national security. However, according to the author, the recent assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi Arabian journalist who stays in Turkey, has showcased that authoritarian regime do fear the written word. And therefore, according to the author, this shows that the pen is mightier than the sword. Now, the specific understanding on how the pen is mightier than the sword would first be relevant with regards to your paper essay, and secondly, from the perspective of GS Paper 4 within the subsection Ethical Issues in International Relations. Now, apart from this, there's one more aspect that you need to understand. Now, what the author is trying to say is that Saudi Arabia has been able to openly defy pressure from Western countries. And according to the author, the reason Saudi Arabia has been able to resist pressure from Western countries over the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi is first because of Saudi Arabia's control over oil prices. The second reason given by the author is that the United States needs Saudi Arabia to contain Iran. And the third reason is that the Saudi monarchy and Saudi Arabia has a lot of investment in Europe and the United States. And the Western countries do not want to jeopardize the investment from Saudi Arabia within their countries. And the fourth and the last reason given by the author is that Saudi Arabia is world's second largest importer of weapons, and most of the Western countries intend to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, and this became one of the reasons on how Saudi Arabia is able to resist pressure from Western countries. And according to the author, this ability of Saudi Arabia to resist pressure from Western countries and protect its national interest has various lessons for India. When according to the author, India has two of the four means of bargaining with Western countries. Is that first, investment from India and to India, and secondly, India is the world's largest importer of weapons, and both of these abilities give India a strong bargaining power like Saudi Arabia when dealing with Western countries. So now hopefully you've understood the second aspect of this article, that Saudi Arabia has four aspects of strategic capabilities through the control over oil prices, the requirement of Western countries to contain Iran, the ability of Saudi Arabia for large investment in Western countries, and lastly the ability of Saudi Arabia to import weapons from Western countries, wherein these four capabilities have given Saudi Arabia ability to bargain and resist pressure from Western countries. And according to the author, India must take lessons from this showcase of capabilities by Saudi Arabia, wherein according to the author, India has two of the four capabilities through which it can bargain with Western countries. First being investment, and second being that India is the world's largest importer of weapons, and therefore most of the Western countries intend to sell their weapons to India. And India can use this as a bargaining chip when negotiating with Western countries. Now, this second aspect should be seen from the perspective of your GS paper 2 within the section International Relations. So now hopefully you've understood the two aspects from this lead editorial. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 10. Now what you need to understand from this article is a small news. Now India and the United States currently engage in an Air Force exercise called COPE India. And India and the United States are currently in negotiations with Japan, wherein the Japanese Air Force may also join the military exercise COPE India. And therefore the military exercise Scope India, which is currently a bilateral exercise between India and the United States, may become a trilateral exercise after Japan joins in. However, you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, and we'll have to wait and see on how India, United States, and Japan move forward with the military exercise Scope India. Now, related question for your practice is Malabar naval military exercise is conducted among which of the following countries? And the correct answer to this question would be given in the end section of this video. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 13. Now from this article, what we need to understand is what is a repo rate. And we'll try to understand this from the perspective of your upcoming 2019 prelims examination. Now repo is a short form for repurchase option, and it is a money market instrument which is used to target inflation. Now the legal definition of repo rate as per the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934 means that repo or the repurchase option is an instrument for borrowing funds, and this fund is borrowed by selling securities, wherein an agreement is signed to repurchase the securities at a mutually agreed future date, and this repurchase at a future date would be at an agreed price and an agreed upon interest rate. So let's say the State Bank of India has some government securities and it wants to sell these government securities to the Reserve Bank of India. Now let's say Reserve Bank of India buys these government securities from the State Bank of India for a period of 1 year at a price of 10 crores and at an interest rate of 7%. Now after this, the State Bank of India would have to buy back these government securities from the Reserve Bank of India after the period of 1 year. And the State Bank of India would have to buy back these government securities from the Reserve Bank of India at an interest rate of 7%. And this interest rate of 7% is known as the repurchase option or the repo rate, wherein the State Bank of India is repurchasing these government securities, and the rate at which this repurchase is being done is known as the repo rate. Now you have to understand that this is a simplified example, but hopefully you've understood the functioning of the repo rate. Now this repo rate or the benchmark policy rate is decided by the 6-member Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank of India. Now what has happened in this news is that the 6-member Monetary Policy Committee, which is headed by the Governor of the RBI Urjit Patel, has decided not to change the repo rate. And the reason they have decided not to change the repo rate so as to keep the retail inflation at 4%. Now another aspect that you should understand is that if the repo rate is increased, then it is considered that it may lead to less borrowing for commercial banks. There also may be a higher rate for consumer loans that are given out by commercial banks. And lastly, if the repo rate is increased, there may be a chance that it may absorb the excess liquidity in the market. However, if the repo rate is decreased, then it leads to easier borrowing for commercial banks. Apart from this, there is also a chance that it may lead to lowering of rate for consumer loans. And lastly, if the repo rate is decreased, there is also a chance of an increased liquidity in the market. Now you have to understand that these impact of an increase in repo rate or a decrease in repo rate should be seen within the context of being speculative also. However, hopefully you've understood the various aspects with regards to the repo rate, wherein the repurchase option, which is known as the repo rate, is a money market instrument which is used to target inflation, and the legal definition of repo means an instrument for borrowing funds by selling securities. However, these securities which have been sold need to be repurchased on a future date on an agreed price and an interest rate. So if the State Bank of India has borrowed funds from the Reserve Bank of India by selling government securities, and therefore the State Bank of India would have to repurchase these securities on a later date. And for repurchasing these securities, the State Bank of India would have to pay interest to the Reserve Bank of India. And on the rate on which the State Bank of India repurchases the securities from the Reserve Bank of India is known as the repo rate. And this repo rate is decided by a 6-member Monetary Policy Committee, which is headed by the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Now, question for your practice is consider the following statements with regards to the repo rate. Now, you have to understand that I've taken the first statement from the prelims examination of 2007 and the second statement from the prelims examination of 2017. And the correct answer to this question would be given in the end section of this video. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 13. Now what this article talks about is that the proposed amendment to the Payments and Settlement System Act of 2007 has proposed to form an independent payments regulatory body. And apart from this, the chairman to this independent payment regulatory body would be appointed by the government in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India. However, this proposed amendment and the proposal to set up an independent payments regulatory body is being opposed by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, the first reason given by the Reserve Bank of India for its opposition to this proposal is that the Vattal Committee on Digital Payments has recommended of establishing the payment regulatory body within the framework of the Reserve Bank of India. The second reason given by the RBI is that a separate regulatory body would increase the cost of compliance for banks. The third reason given by the RBI is that the proposed amendment would not provide any flexibility to the payments regulatory body to regulate the payment sector. And the fourth and the last reason given by the RBI is that the Reserve Bank of India wants the RBI chairman to head the payment regulatory body. Now you have to understand that this news is currently in transition, wherein we'll have to wait and see on how the Government of India and the Reserve Bank of India move forward with regards to the payment regulatory body and the proposed amendment to the Payment and Settlement Systems Act of 2007. Now this article and any upcoming news with regards to the payment regulatory body should be seen within the context of GS paper 2, within the section polity and within the subsection regulatory bodies. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now as we continue to mention in our earlier DNS videos that questions which are asked in the section Geography of the World within your prelims examination, such as which city or region is located in which country, which ethnic group belongs to which country, and similar other questions within the section Geography of the World in your prelims examination. An important way to prepare for such questions is to go through the world page of the Hindu newspaper or the Indian Express or any other paper that you follow and see the various regions, cities or ethnic groups that are mentioned in the headlines. So if we take the world page of today's newspaper, there are two cities that are mentioned. First is Kabul and the second is Kandahar. And the reason the city of Kandahar is in the news is because recently the Taliban killed various high-ranking officials of the city of Kandahar. However, what you need to remember from this news for your prelims examination is that Kandahar is located in Afghanistan. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now this article, the Petroglyphs of Ratnagiri, forms the complete page of page 9. Now this article in the upcoming explanation is first relevant with regards to your prelims examination within the section History of India. And with regards to your mains examination, it would be placed in GS paper 1 within the section Indian Heritage and Culture and within the subsection Indian Culture. Now let us first understand as to what are petroglyphs. Now petroglyphs are images that have been created by removing a part of the surface of a rock, and this part from the surface of a rock has been removed by either incising, picking, carving or any other form. And this creation of images by removing a part of the rock surface is a form of rock art, wherein this image from the Hindu newspaper shows the petroglyphs of Ratnagiri, wherein you can see that part of the rock surface has been removed to create an image of an elephant. Now these petroglyphs have been discovered in and around Ratnagiri, Rajpur and other parts of the Konkan region of Maharashtra, wherein if you take a look at this map, the grey region is the Konkan area of Maharashtra, which includes Raigad, Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg region of Maharashtra, wherein over 1000 petroglyphs have been found in this region. So now hopefully up till here you understood as to what are petroglyphs, and apart from this you also understand the location of these petroglyphs on a map with respect to the Konkan region. Now let us understand the importance of this discovery of petroglyphs in the Konkan region. Now you need to understand that the dating of these petroglyphs is yet to be ascertained. However, it is considered that these carvings belong to the middle to the later Stone Age, wherein it has been assumed that the petroglyphs of the Konkan region in Maharashtra could be contemporary to the Bhimbetka rock shelters in Madhya Pradesh, the rock carvings in Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh, apart from the petroglyphs discovered in Tamil Nadu and in Tripura. Now an important aspect of these petroglyphs is that the rock art of the Konkan region is on laterite stone, while petroglyphs which have been discovered in other sites in India are generally on the stone granite or sandstone. Apart from this, there is a common assumption that these petroglyphs were properly created by nomadic tribes, since these petroglyphs have a depiction of animals, aquatic life, which are generally associated with hunter-gatherer tribes. However, what is different in the petroglyphs of the Konkan region from that of the Bhimbetka rock shelters in Madhya Pradesh is that the petroglyphs in the Konkan region do not depict any hunting scenes, while the carvings at the Bhimbetka caves or in Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh do depict hunting of animals. And the fifth and the last unique feature of these petroglyphs is that they depict rhinoceros and hippopotamus, wherein it has been assumed that these two species were not present in the Konkan region. Now, rhinoceros and hippopotamus are typically found in rainforest, and so it is being assumed that the Konkan region may also have had rainforest during the Stone Age, which would have allowed the presence of rhinoceros and hippopotamus. So now hopefully you've understood the unique features of the petroglyphs of the Konkan region, and you would be able to identify and differentiate the unique features of the petroglyphs of the Konkan region if they are asked in the 2019 prelims examination. Now question was asked in the GS paper 1 of 2015, which had asked that Mesolithic rock art architecture of India not only reflects the cultural life of the times but also a fine aesthetic sense comparable to modern painting. Critically evaluate this comment, wherein you can also use the petroglyphs that have been found in the Konkan region to answer this question. Now, question for your practice is consider the following statements with regards to the petroglyph in the Konkan region, and the correct answer to this question would be given in the end section of this video.
And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.